Welcome to the Business Results Program. This is how you can transform yourself, your team, and your whole company. My name is Winiarski. I'm the CEO of Win Enterprises, LLC, and this video is us recording a podcast episode. Podcast Business Results Radio. Look up businessresultsradio.com or go check it out on iTunes or one of the other podcast platforms. And do subscribe and do give a 5-star review. Now, you as a business leader, we get what you're going through. You've got overwhelm and stress and frustration. You have high expectations on your shoulders, some of which you put there yourselves. Why can I say this? Because we, our team, we've experienced this ourselves. We have been business leaders. We know what it's like. And boy, how cool is it that you have this resource. You can listen to this podcast, gain some insights about what you can do differently, gain some ideas, some strategies that you can put in place right away to make your life easier. That's what we're after here. We want your life to be easier because being a business leader does not have to be this challenging, doesn't have to be this hard. And we want you to exceed your expectations, excel, and achieve the results you want, get your team to thrive, and your company to just absolutely go right through the roof. And you can do that here. Enjoy this episode. Everyone, welcome again, Business Results Radio. This is our podcast where we help you to transform yourself, your team, and your company. Today, I'm here again with our executive mentor, Katrina Shaw. Katrina, how are you today?
I'm doing great.
Yes, we are doing great. We were just having a short chat before we fired this up, and she's telling the truth. She's doing great. So today we're going to talk about goals and the right way to set goals and what to do to actually achieve them. This is a valid topic any time of the year. What's interesting is at the beginning of every year, and we always run into goal setting in the disguised as though those New Year's resolutions. And by now, if you're like most people, they're gone. Right? Most people set them because it's just the exercise to do, and then they're gone. So what's interesting about today, we want to make sure that you understand goals and the process of goals and why they're good for you, why you can become better. And also, we're going to talk about some of the problems and the pitfalls, along the way. So, here's how the two of us are going to play off each other today. I think if you've picked up a copy of Act Now, a daily action log for achieving your goals in 90 days. That was an international #1 bestseller from a few years ago. So that's had a lot of traction. And I think that we have the Action Strategies program that builds on the principles of Act Now. There's the work with Jack Canfield that I've done. I've been on media as a guest talking about goal achievement, and there's just lots there. So methodology-wise, I'll plug in there. Now, Katrina obviously is working a lot with the inner game and what gets people stuck. So we're going to banter back and forth and just have a blast. How's it sound to you, Katrina?
Awesome.
Yeah. So let's get going. So one of the mechanical things, right off the bat is a lot of you have probably heard of SMART goal, S-M-A-R-T. And I want to expand on that and talk about SMART goals done right, R-I-G-H-T. And this is something that I picked up when I went through the Professional Success Coach Institute program to become a certified professional success coach. And these are some people, friends of mine. We had all gone through Jack Canfield's higher level trainings together, and they put together this really amazing program. Back then it was Sean Weisner and Jody Nicholson, and then Jody's expanded it to many other people. And if you go a Google search, you'll see there's a whole lot of folks who have actually become certified in this methodology. And the SMART goals, a lot of people have heard that, but SMART goals done right is actually a big plus. Let's talk about what that acronym means real quick, just to get you grounded. So SMART, setting a goal that is specific and measurable. SMA, attainable. Relevant is the R, and time bound, meaning that you set a date attached to it. Now that part, a lot of you have heard that before, but I want to expand that now. SMART goals done right, RIGHT, and I'm going to refer to this now. Realistic, inspirational, uses your G, gifts, in harmony, meaning in harmony with your purpose, and then time tested and true. So what that means is you believe that it's attainable, it's realistic in the first place. It inspires you. It's not something that you feel like you must do and you're not getting a buzz from it at all. You're just, it's something that is uplifting and you get excited about. Using your gifts, if you can align your goals with things that are your natural gifts and passions and you can bring them forward, it's going to be easier to achieve. In harmony with your purpose, that's another success accelerator. And then lastly, time tested and true. That means someone out there in the world has demonstrated it's possible to do exactly what your goal is. So you're not trying to cut new ground. You're not having doubt that nobody can do this. It's not possible. So SMART goals done right, both of those hand in hand, actually will elevate your ability to achieve. So Katrina, make some commentary points about what we just talked about there.
It's interesting. I don't love that time tested and true comment about, has somebody else achieved this? Because I think of, Amazon, I think of Apple, I think some of the most, successful companies in the world didn't look at it and be like, has someone done this before? They had the exact opposite idea of let's get absolutely innovative and do something someone hasn't done. And so I think I understand the purpose of that in terms of achieving a goal. I don't love it because I think it's limiting, and I think sometimes we have to. What's the saying? Reach for the stars, land on the moon.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
I think we have to. I think setting achievable goals and setting ourselves up for success is important. And then I also think we have to create room for greater things to happen and for ourselves to exceed our own limitations. So I have an inner conflict about that, but I think for the nature of what we're trying to talk about today in terms of how do we actually achieve something we want to achieve, it makes sense to me.
Yeah, no, so let me reconcile the inner conflict and simultaneously agree with your point. So Here we are, we're talking to you as a listener from the perspective of you as a business leader. And I absolutely want you to feel that there's no constraints at all to what you can achieve, right? So let's start with that premise. What happens to a lot of people, and I do want to dive into this, Katrina, when we get into really the inner game of what blocks people. What I've identified, and I think where this concept comes from, the time tested and true, is that a lot of people end up getting stuck because they think something is not possible.
Definitely.
So that's the point, and it's as simple as that. So if I've already convinced myself something isn't possible, then
it's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. Exactly right. And that's an important message for you to appreciate as you're listening and daydreaming the aspirations that you have and the goals that you want to set. If you've got a little voice out here going, that can't happen, that's not going to happen. So one of the defense mechanisms for that is, well, has anyone else in the world ever done that?
Yeah.
And so it doesn't have to be the precise that, like inventing the iPad or the iPod, like Apple did, now 20 years ago. Isn't that crazy? Like how long ago that was?
Whoa, where does time go?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Let's not have that conversation today.
Yeah.
Where does time go is the right question though, when we're talking about our goals and we think, well, wow, I'm going to set this goal. And then you realize like the year just went by and I didn't achieve what I wanted to achieve. What happened?
Yeah.
Right. So time does work against you that way. Here's
Yeah.
an interesting dynamic. We as human beings tend to underestimate what we can actually achieve in the long term.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of people talking about this now on different podcasts and YouTube videos and things. Is that, you know, some people have like a rule of, I don't know, 30 or whatever, that, you know, we're only using 30% of our brains, or I don't know what the number is, but and people have varying opinions on that. But I think it's true. I think I look at my own life and what I'm capable of, and I'm using a fraction of my potential. And if I actually committed to, you know, the goals, the things that I want for myself, allowing room for, you know, bigger things to happen, I can't imagine where I would be. Like it's kind of you know, I try to use that optimistically as opposed to like, oh, I'm wasting my life, I'm not using my potential. But I'm like, wow, human beings limit themselves. We really do. And
Yeah.
you know, I definitely do not apply myself to my fullest potential.
Well, if you want to have a comparison, watch the movie Hidden Figures, right? Which is back in the 60s. There were the crew of you know, astronaut engineers trying to figure out how to get Neil Armstrong onto the moon. And, you know, holy cow, you talk about the level of computation that they didn't have calculators. I mean, now you just you grab your iPhone, right? And you could do more than, you know, what the computers were available to do back in that day. You know, so that's something that I realize is, you know, and the caution here, Katrina, is what you said. Oh boy, you don't want to compare, and recognize what the real true potential is to use your brain power and our capabilities, and realize, oh my God, I'm skirting by not doing anything, right?
Well, and so like, you know, let's get down into sort of the nitty gritty of that. Like, I think, so when you're talking about, you know, has this ever been done before? You know, you don't want to get into the trap of comparison either, right? You don't want to feel like, oh, this person's somehow better than me, or they have, you know, more access to resources, or they're capable of doing it, or I'm not. Because I think that, you know, one of the biggest sort of challenges in human beings right now is this comparison and feeling like somehow someone is more capable than we are. So again, I think there's this interesting trap that we can get into, but I think that's where some of the blocks that can come up. One of the biggest things I think is fear. Whether it's, you know, fear that I'm somehow not as good as that other person, fear of success. I think we talked about this maybe in another podcast of playing small, and Brene Brown talks about that, in that we sort of learn to inhibit ourselves for a myriad of reasons. But I think fear is one of the biggest things that holds us back, and working through blasting through that fear so that we can get to where we want to be, and embracing a new version of ourselves. So I think even it can be scary to imagine actually succeeding. It can be scary to acknowledge, like, that means I have to show up as a different person. I have to be a different person in my life if I'm truly committed to these changes and succeeding and meeting my goals and X, Y, and Z. Now that's big scale, but I think even small goals, like wanting to, you know, get more in shape or whatever it is, it's still a new version of yourself. And so there is a barrier of fear of, you know what, I'm a different person.
Yeah. And I want to dive into this a little bit. I'm going to pause it just for a second so we can just wrap I feel it's important for you to understand that SMART goals done right, just so that you can get the essence of it. So SMART, you got that. Essentially, it's this. What is it you want to achieve? How much do you want to improve it by? Like, from what to what, right? So you can measure it, and by when. So if you've got that nailed down, what is it you want to do, from what to what, by when, then the structure of it is basically right. And then the RIGHT side is making sure that it aligns with your internal motivations to get there. So closing that down now, let's go back to this question of, what if I get there? What if I do achieve this goal? What will that mean? And, you know, even though this is business results radio, so we're talking about results in the area of you and your company and what is it you're achieving here. Let's talk about our physical bodies, right, for a second here. And you know, we all have a point of view about, do we look right? Are we too big or too small, basically, right? So let's just go with that one for a second. I'll tell my own personal story. So, and this is already about 10 years ago. I actually didn't like the amount of weight that I had put on. I didn't like how I looked in pictures. And I was motivated at that point, and I made a commitment, another key word, to shrink down. I was going to lose weight. I'm going to use different language because I don't want to say lose, because we tend to find things that we've lost, right? So you don't want to find the weight afterwards. But essentially, I wanted to change my body composition, put on more muscle, reduce my level of body fat, get to my ideal weight. I actually hired a nutritionist and a fitness coach. And interestingly, I tipped the scales at just over 200 pounds at that point. And you know, we did some math, and you know, she came back and said, your ideal body weight ought to be 165. What? I haven't weighed 165 since like high school or maybe freshman year in college. Are you kidding me? So that was my first block, right? You know, is that reasonable? Where we ended up was, I ended up with a 175 long-term goal. And I had this idea to go down from 200 to 185. And I set the time for this. Remember, this was Halloween, because I ate as much Halloween candy as I could, Katrina, you know, because I was starting the next day with the idea that I would hit 185 by December 31st. By the way, I hit 187 by December 31st. I missed the goal. I hit 185 the following week. Was I upset? I loved it. Right, I loved it because I shrunk down tremendously, and I kept going, and I was working out, I was getting up early, I was doing all of the actions. That's another key phrase here, building all the actions in that were required, and I got down to 180, 178, 177. Then I went 175, 173, 171, and that's when I sabotaged my results. That's when I said, this is too much. I wanted to, you know, my behaviors were all the same. I was doing all of the right things, and my body was just responding. You know, I was low body fat, I was cut, but I had this mental barrier that 170 would be too much. And that's when I started to go back to unhealthy eating, you know, slept in on some days. And then, you know, 2 years later, I was back above 190 because I had sabotaged based on exactly what you said. I had this fear of success, and it didn't line up in some way with my own personal self-image.
Yeah.
What do you see in your world related to that?
Yeah, I mean, tons of that. I think self-sabotage is a huge topic of discussion. And I think it shows up in all ways. I think it's scary to change. And I think even if we looked at it from like a business dynamic, a business perspective, creating change and powerful change is scary because it forces you to do things that maybe are uncomfortable or you don't want to do, right? Like if you really want a culture change or, you know, perspective change in the company, you're going to probably have to identify people who don't align, who don't actually live by the values or vision of the company, all kinds of things, which then forces you to do uncomfortable stuff. You know, let someone go, hire and fire, change different positions. let go of your own perspective of your own roles and your own responsibilities and duties. I mean, it's never ending. There can be a whole host of things that have to change. And people don't like to do that. They like to stay where they're comfortable. And so, yeah, whether it's, your own body weight or image of who you are and what you are as a person, whether it's your own image of who you are as a CEO or whatever, it's really hard to integrate and see yourself in a totally different way. And it's not that, like, at the core that you're necessarily an entirely different person, but there is this concept of, like, we're always evolving, we're always growing, and if we can commit to that, then we have to get very comfortable with what that means, and human beings are just not overly comfortable with change.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And one of the things we end up doing a lot of in our projects out in the world when we're working with companies is focusing on the change management piece, focusing on the level of engagement with the teams, with the employees, not just a leader decision that's then mandated through and expect it's going to work very well. We've seen that tried. It doesn't work. It doesn't stand up for very long because there's this sort of gravitational pull back to the way it was that you need to actively plan and work through to break the reliance on the old way and start to build some desire, not just from the leader standpoint who made the decision to go in a direction with a new strategy, but to get everyone excited about and then to buy into that new way as being a better, even though it's somewhat unknown and fuzzy, it's a better way than the old way. And so there's a whole set of change management exercises that are really important to factor in. In fact, that's probably important enough that we'll do a whole nother podcast on change management at some point soon. So this is a great conversation. Let's talk about just another methodology point related to goal achievement, and then dive into some more of the inner game. So if you think about, some of you may have seen either YouTube videos that I've done, or if you've been in the keynote that I've done on the 5 C's of goal achievement, that was based on some of the principles within the book Act Now. Essentially, here they are. I'm just make sure I got them right and read them off too. But the 5 C's: cascade, create, commit, confirm, and then celebrate. So the idea of cascading is taking your longer term goals that are really big and cascading them down into smaller chunks, right? So this is what I want to be in 3 years, or even in a year. Go from 3 years to 1 year now to the next 90 days. Create.
Yeah, so I think
fire away.
I'll make a comment there. Just sorry to interrupt you. I think the important thing is working backwards. So a lot of us we're like, okay, well, what's my first step? And that in itself can be a barrier because we just don't know where to start. So that concept of working backwards and being like, okay, where do I want to be? And then you break it down in, let's say it's, where do I want to be at my annual report? And then quarter 4, end of quarter 4, then quarter 3, what do I need to achieve by quarter 2, quarter 1? And you sort of break it down into achievable things by time to ultimately reach the end outcome. So you want to focus on an outcome and then work backwards to the steps so that you're not trying to figure out what's my first step and I don't actually know where I'm going. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're right on the money. And what I love about this conversation is we're sharing a concept. One of us will share a concept, and then the other one brings it right into what business leaders like you care about, right? So from a business results standpoint. So the idea of out there, long-term dream, something a little bit concrete in a period of time, more concrete in a shorter period of time, and then finally a chunk of time. This is why we recommend looking at things in 90-day chunks, because 90 days is long enough to move the needle. It's also short enough that you can stay focused on it long enough, right? Without losing and starting to drift and start doing other things.
Yeah, I like the concept of 90 days. I think particularly for personal goals, it can be really helpful. But I think I think it has to be, you know, in companies, I think 90 days is a small amount of time in the grand scheme of change, right? And particularly big change. And so one of the things that I think is it's almost like, you know, getting the in 5 years, this is our like big vision, our, you know, there's that concept of like the big, hairy, audacious goal, the BHAG. So it's like, that's 5 years. And then, so how do we sort of make that smaller in 3 years? And then what's our end of year absolute outcome? And then what's, like I said, the quarters. And so the first 90 days is like, what do we need to achieve to be moving that needle? And so I think 90 days can be really helpful for, I guess, maybe smaller magnitude of things. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I might be totally wrong here. This is a personal opinion of mine. But I think if we only focus on 90 days, we're not actually seeing a whole picture here. And again, we can get then stuck on where are we actually moving when we hit that 90 days.
Yeah, perfect conversation. And so here's what I recognize, you know, by trying to go fast and, you know, run through the model for you. So think of Cascade as having connection points, another C, accidentally, but there's another C, connection points. So where I want to be 5 years from now connects to where I want to be in 3 years, connects to 1 year, and connects to the 90 days. So by achieving this set of goals, enables you to then reset to enable you to hit this goal, which by doing the work required enables you to then hit this goal, and then, you know, continuing up the ladder. And the best part about that is, as you're going to learn as you get into it, right? Sometimes people are plan, and don't take any steps. So this is why the action side of this is so important. So as you get into, you know, you focus on 90 days, that's not in a vacuum pretending that nothing matters after that. It actually matters a great deal. What you're essentially trying to do is gain some focus and alignment across your teams to make sure that you're making a difference on some things that matter.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting that you say that. And just a quick point here that I think, particularly, you know, if you're starting from 5-year goal and working your way backwards, and then, you know, action, you know, specifically from 1 year backwards or 90 days backwards, I think there's always room for reassessment, because once you start getting the ball rolling and once you start taking action, you might realize, oh, you know, the idea that we had or the thought we had actually could be shifted, and it allows room for things to organically adjust and grow into their own thing, because we don't necessarily know everything we need to know for a 5-year plan. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, that's right.
And a reintegration, and it's not just like the 5-year plan is the plan and absolutely don't derail from it. There's always reassessment and reintegration.
Right. And in fact, everything is really a set of plan, do, check, act cycles. You know, that's the Hemming wheel, the cycle that you do the plan, you make the plan, then you do the plan, do, and then check. How did we do? What did we learn? And then based on what we learned, act. What do we do next? And then keep that cycle turning. So that's another podcast episode we can really dive into. I love this.
So go on with your other C's there.
Okay, yeah. So wrapping that up. So create an action plan. So it's one thing to have a goal, but now what are the known things that you have to go and do? And write them down, figure out who's responsible for what, so that people now have actions to take. So those are the planned actions. Then we get into commit, confirm, and celebrate. Committing is committing to taking daily action. So that, you know, of course, within Act Now, there's 3 types of actions you can take on a daily basis. The planned action step. So what can I do today towards the action plan? You know, according to the action plan, that will get me there. What are the daily habits that are those that are proven success accelerators, that those most successful people and businesses have followed? And then third, the inspired actions. By doing the first 2, you get the idea. You get that inspirational hit that wasn't on your action plan, but now it's like, that idea is gold. I'm going to take action on that. And you end up moving forward faster. So those are the 3 types of actions. Confirming is really the act of logging it down. That's the daily action log. So keeping track of your progress. And then when you do achieve, remember to celebrate, right? Celebration builds muscle memory. You want to repeat the experience because it felt so good to actually get there. So you and your team throw the pizza party, whatever it is, just something symbolic so that you can go forward and then do it all over again. So those are the 5 C's.
I'll make a comment on celebrating because I think it's often missed is that, I think you have to feel the internal experience of, success and what it feels like. I genuinely believe that the integration process that happens is that when we actually feel that, we experience like, this feels good, this gives me inspiration to keep going. And when we get stuck in that, achieve this, okay, move on to the next, achieve this. And there's that mindset of like, wake up, crush it, go big, reach those goals. And I mean, that's huge. That mindset is growing big, like wake up and crush it. But if you don't enjoy the actual physical experience of this felt amazing to achieve, I mean, then you're just in plow mode, you're in autopilot, you're in overload, you can burn yourself out, and you're not actually experiencing, this feels good, this gives me a sense of purpose, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I'm going to continue on feeding myself, filling myself up, and moving where I want to go. So I think celebrating is so important, but it's more than just like, oh, woohoo, yeah, we did it. It's like, no, experience that so that that's the thing that fills you up, and that's the thing that actually fuels you to do bigger, better, greater things instead of just being in plow mode.
Yeah, and consciously decide to do it because we tend to be, nothing's ever good enough, and in fact, that part of being good at business is to not be, not to just tolerate your existing levels of performance, to keep challenging yourself, but to do it in balance, right? And make sure that you do pause to celebrate along the way.
Yeah.
Let's get into some of those things that are going on inside of us that can get in the way of goal achievement. So, Katrina, you've got a lot of experience in this area. People are stuck. Why are they stuck? Why are their goals not happening? What are some of the things? And we talked about a few of them, like fear of failure or fear of success. So you can build on those, but also what else?
I think a lot of times what comes up is people have these like inspired ideas, but they just don't know how to do it. Like they don't know what step to take, right? And there's a bit of a freeze or a hesitation of, I don't know, I don't have a clear path, and there's a discomfort in navigating a world unknown, right? There's a discomfort in just, whether it just be starting or whether it be actually creating a business plan or, an action plan for goals, whatever it is, to support that process. And so I think people just freeze. They have these amazing inspired ideas, but the action and the unknowingness of how to go about that really causes a sort of like paralysis in some ways. Yeah.
And, we've all been there or have seen other people who are in that spot, especially if you do run a company or in one of the senior leadership roles, and you can imagine a dry erase board session and you're writing down all of these ideas and you're excited, and then you go and you delegate out, I want you to take this, you to take this, you to take this, and then you check back a week or two later, what's the progress? And you find that some people are like, oh man, I haven't gotten started yet. I don't know what to do. And you're like, oh, you could have come back like 14 days ago and we talked about it. But, the reason for that a lot of times is like, yeah, I mean, it sounds exciting, but I don't know where to get started, right? So getting off of step 0, getting into motion is everything. This is almost like the metaphor of writer's block. I've got a bunch of books that I've written, and I can tell you I've got stuck on every single one of them at some point, right? And you're like, oh, it's not making progress. It doesn't feel right today. You push it aside. You work on other things, and then no progress is made on the writing. You got to get a manuscript turned in. And so you just start, and it could be garbage, whatever it is at first. but very quickly you get in this mode, and next thing you know, you've got something valuable to contribute. Nothing happens until action happens.
Well, that's the thing, is that there's this misconception that motivation is supposed to come, right? And then that's going to fuel action. But it's the opposite. Action is what fuels motivation, because when you act, so let's go back to a simple example. You're not going to just get, motivation and inspiration to go to the gym when you've never gone to the gym. But if you force yourself to start with, half an hour walk on the treadmill, and then you maybe sign up for a program from a trainer or something like that, those things, you start to notice results. Your jeans are a bit looser. You're feeling more energetic. You're like, oh, this is what it feels like to feel good. I actually want to go. And it creates internal motivation because you acted. So that's very important, is that motivation doesn't just come. Motivation is built based on action. So definitely taking the first step and just starting. Mind you, I want to acknowledge that that's not easy. So, let's be real here, because it's easy to preach that. It's easy to say, just start. You want to have an online business, just start. It's not that simple. So sometimes looking for, mentorship, I think, is a huge, huge thing that can support you in that. There's lots of things that I've done that I would not have started if I didn't have the right mentor, or if I didn't just open up to, different possibilities, right? Register for courses, learn, talk to people. Then all of a sudden it's like that sort of subsidiary action, or, secondary action is subsidiary. That's not the right word.
You can make up words on this show. It's totally
secondary action. Sorry, it's a long day. Secondary action in and of itself is like fueling the primary action that I actually want to do, right? Because now all of a sudden things are happening and people come into my life and someone offers to mentor me. And so I think even sometimes expanding your network or expanding your horizons allows you to then have the right people or knowledge in place to take the first step, instead of just saying, well, take the first step.
Yeah. So if you're not sure what to do, at minimum, go ask somebody else who's done it, or go to the Google, right? Just do a little bit of research and get some inspiration about other ideas, but don't get lost there. That's the other thing. People mistake, things like research analysis turns into paralysis, and you haven't done anything, right? So just caution there, but go ahead and do a little bit if that's going to move you out of your stuck zone. You know what I sometimes do? Just on my phone, I'll set it for like 20 minutes, because I know if I start diving into Google, I could lose 90 minutes in there, right? Because next thing I know, I'm like, oh, look, there's a video of a dog dancing or something. Like, how did I get here? I'm trying to figure out how to solve this problem. So beep, 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 20 minutes later, I'm like, okay, am I good enough to move forward? Right, so that I don't allow myself to get stuck. So I cut you off. Go ahead. You were going to say something.
No, not at all. No, I think it's spot on. It's I hope as we're sort of talking about this, I don't like to be preachy and talk about how simple this stuff is, right? As somebody who struggles myself, and as I mentioned earlier, I only use a small percentage of my potential, and I don't want this to sound like just go do it and it's simple. I really want to validate these are not easy things to do, and it's not easy to level up. It's honestly not, which is why, there's a whole bunch of tools in place, which you briefly mentioned, but mindset is a big thing. And a lot of these successful people around us, they do a lot of things to work through fear, to work through blocks, to imagine themselves successful, visualizations, mindset, all kinds of things. That there are tools we have to use to equip ourselves, and then there's external things. And when we can adopt an attitude of, I always have something I can learn from everyone, can I open myself up to reaching out, and can I practice reaching out? And Sometimes it's even those small things that can change your whole world. And even yours and my working relationship happened because I went to a public speaking course, because that's just decided to do that. And there I met somebody, there I met you, and things just sort of unfolded organically. So I'm giving these thoughts and ideas because I know that it's not easy. And I just don't want to preach about that.
Yeah, I think if somebody is stuck and not taking any action at all, you might take that as the little bird analogy, where mama bird, kicks the baby bird out of the nest because mama's confident in that baby bird's ability to open their wings and soar and not crash to the ground. However, if you take a look and say, I don't think that person knows to open their wings, and they might not, you're not going to kick them out of the nest, right? You're going to put other mechanisms in place to support them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really timing or the appropriateness and timing of when to take different actions. We do want you to take action. We want you to get into motion. We also know that along the way, you're going to run into things. You'll bump into things. I've done that or seen that with some of the various project teams that we work with. They get into, well, if this is successful, then that means, and they come up with some story that I'm personally going to end up with way more work to do. Now, some convoluted way to get there, maybe it's true, maybe it's not true, but in essence, it would be like, until they vocalize that, it's like, well, no wonder they're not actually taking the steps, because they have this other fear that it's going to mean something bad for them rather than something good. So I want to get into a quick conversation about an individual owning the goal. So think of a business where the boss is setting a goal for an employee,
mm-hmm.
and the employee doesn't feel like they own it. The likelihood of success, we talked about this right at the beginning of this episode, not very high.
Yeah.
Unless there's external motivation, hey, deliver this, what's the progress, what's the status? And that's the work environment that sometimes happens that way. But what would be better is if that employee did own it, did get excited about it. So I've got some ideas, but I want to hear your angle on how to make that more of the real case so that they actually make the goal happen as opposed to just getting beaten on.
Oh, geez, that's a complex question, because I think this is the reason that a lot of people are unhappy in their careers, right? Like, I think a lot of people aren't doing work that means something to them, or are micromanaged by a boss, or, someone, breathing down their neck. This has to be done. There's not a lot of, self-initiative, or sense of purpose of like, why am I doing what I'm doing? And this means something to me. And, Simon Sinek talks about this in Know Your Why. And if you go to work to pay the bills, which, it's a reality, we do have to do that. It makes it harder to achieve these goals. So, I think, gosh, what would my answer be for this? I'm not sure. I don't know, because I don't believe in telling people to just fake it and just convince yourself that this is something meaningful to you and get it done, because I just don't think it works that way. I think this is a leadership question. I honestly think it stems more to leadership in saying, how have I engaged my employees? Do I have people working for me that are aligned with the vision or mission or outcomes that I want? And have I given people a sense of autonomy to feel like this is theirs, right? Like, I think if we look at it and, if a leadership team or a leader is like, hey, yeah, these are the things that I overall want to achieve. I trust you to do this. Take it. It's yours. I mean, I think that strategy in and of itself empowers people. So yeah, I guess I don't really have an answer for you, except for that I think this is more of a leadership question than it is an employee question. But
well, I really love how you answered it, and you covered a lot of topics, full range from, the realizing that they need to be passionate and inspired by the goal, the assignment, essentially, and not to beat on them necessarily, and then to get to a point where it's the leader's responsibility, that side of the equation. So if I were to have been asked that and to answer it without you here, I would have brought in a lot of the same. And here's the point that I want to just summarize with is, you as the leader, don't fool yourself that just because you gave someone an assignment, that all's good, all's well in the world, and they're going to run with it. They may deliver the results you want perfectly well. They may also suffer internally some angst and dissatisfaction because it doesn't align very well. So what you can do is invest a little bit more of your time and energy to make sure that that person appreciates the background. What's the backstory to why you're making the request in the first place? That might be enough. Or engaging in a two-way conversation about what it is that needs to be done from a business standpoint, and then the role that you want them to play in making that happen, and then see if there's some give and take, so that maybe you end up that they take on their own 80 or 90% of what you were hoping they would. And then the other 10%, which would have gotten in their way of being successful, or at least maybe delivered a result, but not personally satisfying, that could have longer term cultural damage that they end up eventually leaving you. Maybe the 10% is no big deal, and you have another way to handle that, right? So it becomes a dialogue. It is a leadership question, and I think we nailed it down pretty well in that. So good work. So let's wrap up this conversation. The topic today was goals. It was all about, what do you have to do to recognize goals are good for you? How do you achieve them? What are some things that you can actually do to improve your chances? The problem, of course, many people don't know how to set goals in the first place. So we talked a little bit about that. And then, of course, there's that inner dialogue, the inner game, things that will inevitably pop to the surface. And I would suggest that you want to get those things to the surface so that they're known, not unknown. And then you could find a way to deal with them, whether it's through a mentor, through the leader of the business, through whoever it is, to help you and get you to a point where you're thriving. The concept of setting goals and getting excited and thriving as you achieve them. How's that, Katrina? What a nice conversation we had today.
Yeah, it was awesome. I mean, I think there's so many places that you can go with this kind of stuff, right? And there's so many ways that you can really experience success and get what you want out of life, create a life that you want. And that's the thing that gets me really revved up. And I absolutely love this type of work with people, because seeing them get somewhere that they wanted to get and didn't know how is so rewarding. It's just amazing to watch people create their own joy and fulfillment and success and happiness, whatever word you want to attach, or words or feelings, whatever. It's really amazing. And human beings are so powerful. We can accomplish some amazing things. So it's exciting.
It is exciting. Katrina, thank you for your time today. And for all of you listening, let's go set some goals, put some of what you learned today into practice. Go ahead and listen to this podcast episode again, because it was really rich, dense with content, and you'll definitely want to go back to your notes. All right, take care, everybody.